It is my honor to welcome you to the Centrale Bank van Curaçao and Sint Maarten Symposium titled Better Data, Better Decisions. Today's event marks the second in a series of research-focused symposiums scheduled for this year. In January, we hosted the first symposium of the year in Curacao, which addressed the critical role of government in the economy. Today's symposium places particular emphasis on the importance of data, particularly balance of payment statistics for research, economic analysis, and policy making. Later this year, in November, the CBCS will host the annual Monetary Studies Conference of the Caribbean Economic Research Team, comprising countries of the Caribbean community. During this conference, researchers from across the Caribbean will come together to share insights on critical and timely economic topics. Central banks conduct economic research to provide an empirical foundation for monetary policy making and to support their advisory role to governments. Moreover, such research fosters dialogue and collaboration with the academic community, regional counterparts, and other key stakeholders. In this regard, data and statistics play a crucial role for both research and policy making. As British physicist, mathematician, and engineer Lord Kelvin once said, "If you cannot measure it, you cannot improve it." However, small countries often face challenges in collecting accurate and reliable statistics due to limited resources, capacity constraints, and vulnerability to external shocks. Sint Maarten is no exception. In addition, we must acknowledge that Sint Maarten is a relatively young country, having begun collecting country-level statistics only 15 years ago. Compounding this is the open border with the French side of the island, which adds further complexity to building a robust and comprehensive statistical system. Against this background, the purpose of today's symposium is threefold. First, we aim to raise awareness on the importance of data and statistics for research, economic analysis, and policy making. Today, we will focus in particular on the balance of payment statistics, which is one of the key data sets compiled by the CBCS. Second, we will present findings from our empirical work with a specific focus on Sint Maarten. Our research shows how balance of payment statistics help us assess Sint Maarten's performance in terms of foreign direct investment inflows and regional integration. And third, we hope to engage with you, receive your feedback, and foster meaningful dialogue that help us improve the quality and relevance of both our statistics and our research. We are also delighted to welcome representatives of the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank, and in particular Governor Timothy Antoine, who will join us later this afternoon. We look forward to hearing his insights into the experience of small Caribbean economies within CARICOM. His participation highlights the importance of regional cooperation, exchange of experiences, and institutional collaboration. Ladies and gentlemen, our efforts extend beyond dialogue at symposiums. We are actively working to improve the availability and quality of Sint Maarten's data landscape through collaboration with key stakeholders. Following the recommendations received last year from the IMF's Regional Technical Assistance Center, CARTAC, we are enhancing the compilation of our balance of payment statistics. This includes improvements in the estimation of merchandise imports, re-exports, as well as foreign exchange earnings from tourism. We are also in discussions with the Institut de Mission des Départements d'Outre-mer, I hope I said it correctly in French, on ways to exchange information and data to better measure cross-border flows and GDP, particularly given Sint Maarten's open border with the French collectivity of Sint Maarten. In addition, we aim to strengthen our collaboration with Sint Maarten's Department of Statistics and other key stakeholders to improve not only trade statistics, but also real sector data, such as national accounts and inflation figures. Allow me now to provide a brief overview of the balance of payments of the Monetary Union of Curacao and Sint Maarten. The balance of payments, ladies and gentlemen, is a statistical statement that records all economic transactions between residents and non-residents of an economy. Since Curacao and Sint Maarten form a monetary union, our transactions, or the transactions between the two countries, are not recorded on the union's balance of payments. The balance of payments includes exports and imports of goods and services, income and current transfers, capital transfers, and external financing flows such as foreign direct investment, portfolio investment, loans, and credits. Specifically, exports and imports of goods and services, income flows, and current transfers are recorded in what we call the current account of the balance of payments. Generally, the income transfers and the current transfers, income refers to, for example, interest and dividend payments to foreign investors, and current transfers are, for example, workers' remittances, represent a small portion of the overall current account. A particularly important component for us as central bankers of this balance of payments is the change in gross official reserves, because it reflects the union's ability to support the fixed exchange rate regime and maintain external stability. Hence, the balance of payment data is key in guiding monetary policy decisions to ensure external stability and preserving our peg. At the same time, the balance of payments helps or can help policymakers identify external vulnerabilities, such as an over-reliance on tourism, limited source markets for imports, or dependency on external financing. This is particularly relevant for open and small economies like Sint Maarten, which are highly exposed to external shocks. In the next presentation, our colleagues Ines and Ghislaine will delve deeper into the sub-accounts and technical aspects of the balance of payments, providing further insight into its structure and compilation. However, before that, I would like to briefly highlight a few specific characteristics of the balance of payments of our monetary union that will help introduce today's topic. The first is the persistent current account deficit. Caribbean service-based economies typically run current account deficits as foreign exchange receipts from exports, mainly tourism, are often insufficient to cover the high import bill. However, when we look at this graph on the left-hand side and also on the left-hand side, we see that the deficit in our monetary union surpasses that of many Caribbean peers. A breakdown of the current account by country reveals that this deficit is largely attributable to Curacao, which has consistently recorded current account deficits over the past decade, while Sint Maarten's current account has hovered closer to balance. This conclusion should, however, be interpreted with caution, because as improvements in the estimation of certain key components are still needed. Some may currently be overestimated or others underestimated. A second characteristic is the over-reliance on tourism as a source of foreign exchange, underscoring a narrow export base and limited economic diversification within our union. Tourism is also highly dependent on a single source market, in Sint Maarten's case, the US. Similarly, import sourcing is concentrated, with both countries heavily dependent on US suppliers. These structural features heighten external vulnerability and amplify exposure to global shocks. A current account deficit implies that the net acquisition of resources from the rest of the world must be financed externally. This is done either by liquidating foreign assets or by increasing liabilities to non-residents. Over the past decade, the monetary union's current account deficit has been financed by a combination of rising foreign liabilities and declining foreign assets. This pattern signals growing external vulnerability, as it suggests increasing dependence on foreign debt without a matching accumulation of foreign assets, potentially undermining long-term sustainability. It is important to note, if you look at the graph, that the year 2010 is an outlier in the data series due to the implementation of the debt relief program associated with the dismantling of the Netherlands Antilles. As part of the program, the Dutch state assumed the public debt of the former Netherlands Antilles and the island territory of Curacao, significantly altering external financing flows in that year. A breakdown of external financing reveals that while the share of foreign direct investment has remained stable, the monetary union has become more reliant on foreign borrowing, especially loans and credits. This raises an important policy question. Are we increasing foreign debt to fund productive investments that generate future returns? Or are we borrowing to finance consumption and one-off spending that do not contribute to long-term growth? Answering this question requires better data on domestic expenditure composition and national savings, which is currently limited by weaknesses in the national accounts. In both Curacao and Sint Maarten, national accounts are often produced with significant delays, reducing their usefulness for timely policy making and analysis. Strengthening the statistical capacity in both countries is therefore essential for gaining a comprehensive and timely understanding of the broader economy and its vulnerabilities. In conclusion, I want to emphasize that high-quality, timely and reliable data are not just technical necessities. They are fundamental to sound policy making, economic resilience, and long-term growth. I therefore encourage all stakeholders to work together. Let us prioritize greater investment in our data infrastructure and systems, strengthen our analytical capacity, and continue building the knowledge base needed to support better, more informed decision-making. Better data leads to better decisions, and better decisions lead to a stronger, more resilient Sint Maarten. With that, I wish you all a productive and insightful symposium. Thank you.
Distinguished guests, esteemed colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, protocol having been established, good morning. It gives me great pleasure to welcome you to this important symposium titled Better Data, Better Decisions, organized by the Central Bank of Curacao and Sint Maarten. Your presence here reflects our shared commitment to making informed, effective, and sustainable decisions for our beloved island. This gathering is more than just an event. It's a crucial step toward transforming how we drive economic and social progress through the power of data. Sint Maarten is a dynamic society rich in culture and potential. Yet, one of our greatest challenges remains our limited capacity to collect, analyze, and apply timely and accurate data to guide policy and investment. Few feel this absence more keenly than the Central Bank, and I commend them for taking this initiative to tackle this long-standing issue. Globally, data has become the most valuable resource. Our economies and communities are increasingly data-driven. Statistics reveal trends, identify opportunities, and highlight vulnerabilities. Whether it's planning tourism, managing financial stability, or designing social programs, access to reliable data is essential. We live in the age of artificial intelligence, where data fuels intelligence. Google's Eric Schmidt once said, there were 5 exabytes of information created from the dawn of civilization to 2003. But that much is now created every 2 days. Let that sink in. Every 2 days. This exponential data growth isn't surprising. Data shows us where we are, where we want to go, and how best to get there. It underpins evidence-based policymaking, reduces guesswork, and enhances accountability. It enables us to anticipate challenges and create solutions tailored to our unique realities. The World Bank in 2018 Data for Development report states, data is a strategic asset for small status or small states. But do we in Sint Maarten treat it as such? Ask anyone seeking reliable data to support investment decisions here, and they'll share frustrating stories. The availability and accessibility of data on our island is far from ideal. I believe the CFT also recently highlighted this gap. Our Department of Statistics under the Ministry of TIAT is doing its best under difficult circumstances, but it needs serious upgrading. Perhaps it should even be made an independent entity so it can operate more efficiently, credibly, and with much greater reach. Despite the importance of data, we still face serious gaps. Crucial statistics like tourism arrivals, employment figures, fiscal indicators, and environmental data are often outdated, incomplete, or unavailable. Researchers among us today can attest to the difficulty in locating the data they need. What's worse, data is often siloed between ministries, making interagency collaboration difficult. How can we plan tourism campaigns or infrastructure investments without accurate tourism trends? Or ensure fiscal discipline without reliable fiscal data? Or protect natural resources without environmental statistics? Sherlock Holmes once said, "It is a capital mistake to theorize before one has data." In policymaking, it is not just a mistake, it is a sin. Inadequate data hinders not just administration, it affects our economic resilience and social development. Poor data leads to flawed decisions, inefficient resource use, missed opportunities, and sometimes policies that make problems worse. What we need is real-time, actionable data to support swift, flexible, and evidence-driven policymaking. Take COVID-19. Our ability to respond to that crisis depended on timely data about public health, employment, tourism, and economic stability. Similarly, Hurricane Irma showed us the cost of not having detailed real-time data at hand. These events underscored the urgency of building a robust data ecosystem. Today, I reaffirm our government's commitment to developing such a system, one that promotes data-driven decision-making, that is inclusive, transparent, and sustainable. This will require collaboration across ministries, sectors, and society. A revitalized public-private partnership is essential to support investment in data infrastructure, capacity building, and awareness. Our vision includes 5 key objectives. 1, enhancing data collection and management. 2, promoting data accessibility and transparency. 3, building analytical capacity. 4, leveraging technology. 5, fostering regional and international collaboration. This is a shared responsibility. Government must prioritize data in strategic planning. Tourism and economic planners must integrate data collection into operations. Financial institutions and insurers can contribute useful data sets, and civil society can help interpret and apply the information for the public good. I must also emphasize the vital role of the private sector. Businesses generate valuable data on consumer behavior, market trends, and supply chains. When shared responsibility, this can vastly improve our understanding of the economy. Embracing better data has wide-reaching effects and benefits, such as evidence-based policymaking, economic resilience, transparency and accountability, competitiveness, and social development. In closing, I urge all of us, public and private sector leaders, academics, and civil society, to become champions of data excellence. Let this symposium be more than a discussion. Let it drive real change, improved data standards, smarter technology use, more training, and stronger partnerships. Together, we can transform data from a scarce resource into a strategic asset, one that empowers us to build a resilient, prosperous, and sustainable Sint Maarten. I thank you.
This will be the outline presentation from us today, with several topics that we will talk about it. The first 4 I will present, and then Mrs. Rolox will go further with the other topics. What is data and statistics, the importance of data, why reliable data matters, understanding the balance of payments, compilation of the balance of payments, challenges of data collection, and the conclusion. About data and statistics. What is data and statistics? These are 2 different terms with their own definition. Data is a collection of facts, such as numbers, words, measurements, observations, or descriptions of things. Under data, you can think about the raw facts and figures without context. For example, a list of scores. Then we have the definition of statistics. Statistics is the science of collecting, analyzing, presenting, and interpreting data. Statistics helps make sense of data by summarizing and drawing conclusions from it. For example, the average of the test scores. We can conclude here that data is the input for statistics. No, data is the input and statistics is the process to have the output. Now that we know what the terms data and statistics consist of, we will go further with the importance of data. Why is data so important for all of us? Data is the foundation for informed decision-making at all levels, from government policies to private sector investment. With data, we can do informed decision-making, we can effectively do problem-solving, gaining insights and understanding, improving processes, and efficiency. With data, we can also track fluctuations and spending behaviors, eliminating the guesswork, developing strategic approaches, identifying what is working well. Now will be the question, is having data enough? And the answer will be no. Why? Because we need to have data, but also we have to emphasize that we need high quality data, good data, consistency of data, so we can rely on the data. Because if you have reliable data, you can do informed decision making, you can trust and have credibility, and you can have efficiency and productivity. High-quality data ensures that the balance of payments is a true reflection of economic activity, allowing policymakers to act confidently. Mistakes or gaps can lead to wrong conclusions about the country's financial health. Without reliable data, economic analysis will be based on assumptions and guesswork. For the balance of payments, precise data is even more important, as it reflects the real financial and trade position of a country. So, what exactly is the balance of payments? The balance of payments, also known as the external sector statistics, is the method that countries use to monitor all international monetary transactions in a specific period. The balance of payment is usually calculated every quarter and every calendar year. The balance of payments is an accounting statement that provides records of all economic transactions between residents of a country and the rest of the world during a particular point of time. So then we have, what is the objective of the balance of payments? The first one, to monitor international monetary transactions and analyze the flow of funds from an economist or financial analyst perspective. For example, here, you can think about if an investor of country A wants to invest $100 million in another country, in stocks, in country B, for example, this transaction is recorded in country B in the financial account, and it will reflect an inflow of capital, which can be used to finance domestic projects, increase your reserves, and or help stabilize your economy. The second objective is to understand a country's economic health and its position in international trade. An example here is, for instance, if a country consistently imports more than it exports, it may need to borrow foreign currency to pay for these imports. This can lead to a depletion of foreign exchange reserves if the deficit persists over time and affect your economic stability. The important components of the balance of payments. We do have, the balance of payments consists of three very important components. The first one is the current account that covers the trade in goods, trade in services, and the primary income. The second one is the capital account, covers the capital transfers, the non-produced and non-financial assets. And the third one is the financial account, which covers the direct investment, portfolio investment, other investment, and the reserve assets. And I hereby conclude my part of the presentation, and I will pass the word to my colleague, Gislen. Gislen will proceed with the other topics. Thank you.
So Ines just explained basically what a balance of payments is. Now let's get to the juicy stuff on how the compilation happens of the balance of payment. For Sint Maarten, especially for Sint Maarten and Curacao, the main source of the balance of payments is the banking transaction. But for Sint Maarten, it's the banks on the Dutch side. We will collect all the banking transactions of the Dutch side and either on a weekly basis. Some banks would report it to us on a weekly basis. Some banks would do it on a monthly basis, depending on the size of the bank, and some find it more efficiently to do it on a daily basis. Not just any banking transactions at our source. It's mostly the transactions that are from a resident to a non-resident. What this means is, maybe for us in the banking, these terms are just normal, but perhaps for one of you, it's like foreign. A resident would be me, Gislen, living here and registered in Sint Maarten. A non-resident, for instance, if I'm transferring 1 million Caribbean guilders to France, and then they would have to do the conversion to the bank, the recipient of these funds would be a non-resident, the person living in France. So, the transactions between a resident and non-resident, that is what a commercial bank is uploading in our system. With these transactions, we will be able to determine per sector what this transaction is based on the reason of payment. You know, when you're on your net banking and you're doing a transaction, At the end of it, you also have to report, like, what's the reason you're doing this transaction. Well, based on that transaction, we'll be able to categorize what type of transaction it is, based on a list that we receive from the IMF. Each transaction have a different sector that it would mean. This is actually our balance of payments. Kindly note that the figures that are here are Caribbean guilders, and this is for the period of Q3 2024. As you may see, I guess for those in the back, it would be difficult. Under merchandise import, general merchandise, here we have noted 341 million Caribbean guilders. What does this mean? How do we reach to this figure? So once we have all the transaction uploaded in the system of the balance of payments, each transaction that has their particular reason of payment, we would categorize it. Once it's uploaded in the system and it's categorized by the commercial bank, we will begin with our cleaning phase. The cleaning phase would entail that we will go through after a certain amount and try to see if this payment makes sense. If this payment, if Ghislaine is sending funds to a person in France and the description state, fuel, does it make sense that Ghislaine, a normal person, is paying for fuel? It won't make sense. On that sense, we would send it back to the commercial bank and we would ask for additional information. And perhaps some of you had experienced that a bank would call you and ask you, hey, you did a particular payment on the 20th of May. Can you perhaps give us more clarification on what that payment was? And then in turn, the commercial bank would contact us with a reason or the explanation that the client gave, and we in turn would be able to amend or clean the data to give it the proper coding that it deserves. Once all of this is done, we will aggregate all the information into one, and then there you will receive our balance of payments. So the merchandise actually falls under the 341. That would be everything that was purchased, let's say furniture, let's say cars, beverages, and food. All of them would be aggregated under this amount. Now, it would be important to note that it's not only the banking transaction, but some reporters also provide their foreign banks for us, also their intercompany reports, and their trade credit. With a foreign bank, certain clients, or especially on the private sector, find it important or easier to pay certain merchandise from their foreign bank account. So then they would provide that information to us that would also be aggregated in our balance of payments. As you could see, not only do we have general merchandise, we have oil products. This is just a snapshot of what our actual balance of payment is. And as Ines already explained, we have different categories, and this is the current account. But this is just a snapshot of a part of it. But to give better context to what I just explained, because I'm sure it's a mouthful, let's do it with an example. So this is just a fictitious company, Island Grind. Island Grind decided on the 7th of March they want to transfer 10 million Caribbean guilder to Nail It and Bail It Construction Company. Now, as you notice, the explanation states invoice 12345. With an invoice as a reason of payment, that won't tell the commercial bank anything, nor the commercial bank, nor us. You won't know what you would have to do with this. Maybe the commercial bank would decide, okay, I will categorize this under material. Probably it's just material they're purchasing. We would find it maybe a bit sketchy, and we would say, you know what, let's ask the commercial bank for additional information. The commercial bank would contact the client. The client would say, oh no, I was just purchasing, this was just a payment for construction services, which is a different category. And then the construction services, you would see reflected here in our balance of payments. I just use an example, but these figures are actually what happened in Sint Maarten at Q3 of 2024. Now imagine if the data was categorized under another sector. That would be a discrepancy, because under the 341 plus the 10 million, it would be 351. So you would think that for that period, the imports or the payments for Sint Maarten was 351 million, and that is not accurate. So it's very essential for us to know exactly why the reason of payment it was done for the certain transaction, so we would be able to properly code it in the sector that it belongs to. Then here you would see that for the period of Q3, it was 19 million under the construction services. What this reflects is other service imports. This means Sint Maarten had a outflow of funds of 19.1 million to pay for construction services. Now, I mentioned that our main source is a commercial bank, but I do have to note that the government as well provide data to us, and we receive the tourism data from STAT, and as well as I mentioned, we have companies that provide their foreign banks and their intercompany and their trade credit. Now, living in a small island, you would understand that if one big player or two big players does not report to us, it would construe the whole balance of payments, and as we would have missing data. As our minister just said, it is important that everyone contribute to the betterment of our economy. Not only our economy, the balance of payments would be much more better if we were able to get more data from all the companies here in Sint Maarten. Because certain things up to the commercial banks, that's where we could see. What happens in abroad on behalf of Sint Maarten, we're not able to see that. So then we would need the cooperation of the different companies to provide this information. Not only the companies, but it would be very beneficial with each one of us while we're doing our transaction to really list what was the reason of payment, because then that would facilitate the commercial bank's work, also as us, as we could properly categorize it. Now, as I mentioned, that it was just a snapshot of our balance of payments. If you're interested to see more information regarding all the different components, you're welcome to find it on our website, your homepage, then you will go to statistics, external sector, and then there you will find our balance of payments that you're more than welcome to download and study. Of course, if you have additional questions regarding it, you're more than welcome to contact me or one of my colleagues that we could further explain and elaborate on this. Now, with all good things have some challenges. As the minister also mentioned, with some challenges that we have here in Sint Maarten is the sharing of data. Companies that are not willing to collaborate in sharing data. As you just noticed, we use the data for statistical purposes, for the betterment of the economy of Sint Maarten. The more data, the better, and the better decision making. As you just saw with our balance of payments, we have different components that would be very interesting for whoever has a company or legislation that needs to make whatever decision, they could base this based on our balance of payments, but we need the data. Another challenge that we would say we have is the unique situation that Sint Maarten has an open border. That creates certain challenges when you're mitigating the data. Another challenge that we have is resources constraint. So all these challenges that we have, we try our best by using mirror data to fill in the gaps where necessary to be able to fill in, as I mentioned, fill in the gaps. Of course, with collaboration between more parties, that would be better. Food for thought. You can have data without information, but you cannot have information without data. If we don't measure something, it becomes neglected as if the problem didn't exist. It is a capital mistake to theorize before one has data. With this thought in mind, I would like to conclude with the balance of payments reflects the true state of our economy. Reliable, high-quality data is essential for the accuracy of data. Not only that, for government official, it provides the insight needed to craft smart economic policies, for trade agreements to investment incentives. For businesses, it highlights opportunities and risks in international trade and finance. As a small open economy that relies on imports and export, a stable and accurate balance of payment supports a stronger economy, a more stable currency, and a better condition for a long-term growth. Without reliable data, a strong balance of payment, both government and businesses, would be navigating blindly in today's complex global environment. That's why high-quality data, detailed and timely data, and your cooperation in providing it to us are so crucial. It is important to note that all the data that is shared with the central bank is treated strictly confidential. As you just witnessed, we publish an aggregated level, so no information is shared. You do not know who shared, what's number, and anything, so you could trust us with your data. Thank you for your attention.
So as the name of the presentation already suggests, statistics are the lifeline for economic analysis. But let me explain why. Before discussing the specific responsibilities of the Economic Analysis and Research Department, it's important to understand the tasks of the CBCS as well. Besides issuing banknotes and coins, conducting supervision of financial sector, managing the foreign exchange reserves, and international transfers of the monetary union, promoting a safe and efficient payment system, the core tasks of the CBCS related to my department, Economic Analysis and Research, are related to the formulation and the implementation of the monetary policy of the CBCS, and providing economic and monetary advice to the governments of both Curacao and Sint Maarten. So, the specific responsibilities related to these core tasks that I just mentioned we draft the monetary policy conducted by the CBCS. We also analyze and report on financial and economic developments. We provide unsolicited and solicited policy recommendations to the governments of Curacao and Sint Maarten, and we conduct empirical research. But what makes our work so important? At its core, economic analysis is the compass that guides monetary, fiscal, and broader economic policies. It helps policymakers understand the current landscape, anticipate future challenges, and make informed decisions that promote growth, stability, and prosperity. But its value also goes further. Economic analysis is vital for assessing if policies such as the monetary adjustment, fiscal policies, and regulatory changes are actually effective. Are they delivering the intended results? Are they reaching the people who need them most? Without rigorous analysis, we're flying blind. In addition, economic analysis also plays a critical role in the work of international institutions, like the International Monetary Fund or the World Bank. These organizations rely on accurate, timely, data-driven insights to monitor global economic developments, provide support where it's needed, and provide financial cooperation across nations and the region. Economic analysis also empowers the private sector. For investors, sound economic analysis provides the clarity, confidence they need to commit capital and make investment decisions. And for businesses, it's essential to sound financial planning and responsible budgeting, helping companies adapt to shifting markets and prepare for the future as well. Now, allow me to take a moment to explain what economic analysis actually entails. At its most practical level, economic analysis helps us monitor short-term economic developments. This often means looking at the economy quarter by quarter, tracking changes in growth, and indicators such as inflation, employment, and GDP. Economic analysis also helps us identify and assess shocks that can disrupt our economies. From energy price spikes to geopolitical tensions and climate disasters, economic analysis helps us understand the impact that these shocks can have on our economy and create uncertainty. Looking further ahead, economic analysis also involves forecasting, like I mentioned before. We use it to project how key economic variables, GDP and inflation, and unemployment, for example, might evolve over a medium-term horizon. Mostly, we use a 5-year horizon. These forecasts are crucial for planning, policy setting, providing a roadmap for governments, institutions, and businesses alike. Finally, economic analysis allows us to evaluate risks to future growth. By identifying potential pitfalls before they even happen, we can take steps to strengthen our economies and build resilience. As briefly mentioned before, economic analysis consists of two parts. one that is backwards looking, how did the economy develop in the last quarter or the last year? And one that is forward looking, how will the economy perform over the next 5 years? For each, we have a model that uses high frequency data to support the analysis. The framework for analyzing past economic developments consists of over 50 indicators ranging from different sectors of the economy, from the international, balance of payments, fiscal, and the real sector, monetary as well. And for our forecasting model, around 117 indicators are used to make our projections. So this also highlights the importance of high value and high quality data. Through our data analysis, we are able to produce the following types of graphs with important economic indicators ranging from the development in tourism, development in the debt to GDP ratio of the government, development in balance of payments, and what's important for our own monetary policy, the development in the import coverage. And all the economic analysis that we conduct are summarized and presented in our flagship publications, the Economic Bulletin. Here you see the Economic Bulletin of our latest publication, the Economic Bulletin of March 2025. And we are expecting to publish our updated version in June 2025, so stay tuned for that one. And our economic bulletins are published on a quarterly basis. Now, besides economic analysis, data and statistics are also vital in conducting empirical economic research. Without data, there would be no research. But why does a central bank conduct economic research? Well, first and foremost, research provides the empirical foundation for sound monetary policy making, which is specifically relevant for us. But it's also about understanding our unique economic environment. Through research, we gain deeper insights into the economies of Curacao and Sint Maarten, how they function, what drives growth, where the vulnerabilities lie, and how they respond to external shocks. We use it also to inform policy, translating analytical findings into concrete practical recommendations that support economic resilience and development in both countries. And moreover, research allows us to engage beyond policies. By connecting with the academic community, it opens the door for collaboration and different and new perspectives. Finally, by fostering public discussion on topics that matter, like public finances, tourism, climate change, we bring important issues to the forefront, encouraging dialogue and participation across society. I think this symposium is a great example of that. The CBCS management has also put more priority on economic research. As a result, we've developed a 2-year research agenda built around key themes that are most relevant to the challenges and opportunities facing Curacao and Sint Maarten today. As part of this commitment, we aim to publish at least 2 high-quality research papers on a yearly basis, ensuring a steady contribution to the body of knowledge on our economies. But to ensure quality, we're also working under the guidance of a professor from the University of Groningen in the Netherlands, who offers academic insights and oversees a robust peer review process. These research findings are presented at local and regional conferences like this one, fostering dialogue and encouraging collaboration across stakeholders and within the Caribbean. But perhaps most importantly, we want our research to have a real-world impact. That's why we are committed to sharing it widely through our feature articles, blogs, interviews, and public presentations, so that the insights that we generate can reach policymakers, business leaders, students, and citizens alike. So how does the CBCS decide on research topics? In general, we have 3 criteria that need to be met. First, is it relevant for the economies of Curacao and Sint Maarten? Is it relevant for the tasks of the CBCS? And does it fit in the focus areas of our strategic plan and ambitions? In general, the research agenda is constructed by gathering various input of stakeholders, our management, and internal discussions within the Economic Analysis and Research Department. Right now, we are currently finalizing the research agenda for 2025 to 2027, and this will be published on our website next month, so stay tuned for that. So how would one go about conducting economic research? I just want to give you guys a little bit of an insight into how we do economic research at the CBCS. It begins with a research question, of course, a topic that is relevant, timely, and important for our economies. Next, we search the existing literature. This helps us build on what is already known and identify where new insights are needed. Then comes the research proposal or the research plan. This is our blueprint. It outlines what we want to study, how we plan to do it, and what kind of data we'll need. When the plan is in place, we start collecting the data, which becomes an input for the analysis using the statistical programs and economic modeling. And finally, we write the research paper, bringing together our research question, our methodology, and conclusion in a clear and structured way. But why is data so important to research? It provides evidence to support claims and conclusions. It also gives us the ability to reproduce findings and test hypotheses, so economic theories. By making data available, and reliability of the research models that were used. It can facilitate also some collaboration between researchers and other stakeholders through data sharing. And it helps to combine or compare results of multiple studies. And lastly, most importantly, it improves the general quality of empirical research. The more research is done, the better the quality of the research becomes. However, before starting with the data collection, there are some factors that need to be considered. The aim of the research, so the research question, this is also an important factor to determine what data you're going to need. What type of data do you need? Is it qualitative or quantitative? Are you collecting data through statistical organizations like the Statistical Office? Or are you conducting interviews, focus groups, surveys, etc.? The methods and procedures you will use to collect, store, and process the data, which indicators are necessary for your research, which question are you going to pose during in your survey, and developing a sampling plan to obtain the data. This involves defining the population, so let's say the group you want to make conclusions about, and also defining the sample, so the group you will actually collect the data from. Before I conclude, I would like to share some of the research papers that are specifically relevant to Sint Maarten that have been published last year and what we are planning to publish in the coming years. In 2024, we published a working paper on the effects of red tape on businesses and economic development, where we conducted a survey among businesses in Sint Maarten in collaboration with the Chamber of Commerce. Second, a working paper on the effects of oil price shocks on the balance of payments of oil importing economies like Sint Maarten has also been published. For this research, CBCS balance of payments data was mostly used. But this year, we also have some interesting research on the economy of Sint Maarten, like the working paper of my good colleague, Jason Lista, who will tell you more about this on FDI inflows and tourism in Sint Maarten. But also we are planning to conduct a survey on the developments on the construction sector in Sint Maarten, which is planned for later this year. Without further ado, thank you for your time, and I hope you have a productive the rest of your symposium.
Today's symposium is extremely important because it helps the community to understand, in particular the business community to understand the reasons why the banks, central banks, and government require information so that they then know and see what to do with this information and why it's important for them to give as much details about the various transactions, particularly when it comes to, like in this case, the balance of payments, which is about the transactions that people pay, and then to give it a correct, let's say, definite explanation, because then we are better able to see how the monies are flowing through in the economy from one year to the next. We can see whether it's more or less, and that way we also get our pulse on the economy. And as a Ministry of TIAT, where the Statistics Department is under, when we can gain the confidence and trust of our stakeholders, then we're in a better position to then be able to get more data, better data, and then we can do better analysis and better policies.
We are hosting this symposium today because we want to create awareness about the importance of data and statistics for policy making, for research, but also for economic analysis. So that is why we have invited people from the government, from the business sector, and we are here as Central Bank to discuss together about the importance of data, but how we can improve the data landscape of Sint Maarten, to have more data, more reliable data, and more accurate data. Now, as Central Bank of Curacao and Sint Maarten, we operate in a monetary union. So both Curacao and Sint Maarten are two countries, but together they form a monetary union. And we do conduct monetary policy, economic analysis, and research for both countries. So that is the relationship. With regards to data, data for both countries are important in a sense for us to do, for example, monetary policy assessments. In that sense, today during the conference, we are focusing on an important statistical overview that we compile, which is the balance of payments statistics. And the balance of payments is compiled for the monetary union, for Curacao and Sint Maarten. In that sense, it is important for us to collect reliable data for both countries, because at the end of the day, we have one union with one peg, and we want to preserve that peg, or as say, the external stability.
And my first question is, what has been your experience where data collection at Sint Maarten is concerned? I want to ask for a report card, but I'm afraid of the grade. So what has been your experience thus far?
So as a central bank, you gather data from different sources, different entities, etc. So we have you can have various experiences in collecting data. For example, if I give an example regarding commercial banks, for example, they have obligation to report to us, so they are easily engaged in providing data. The biggest challenge, for example, is regarding the private sector, where for them, for example, it's not the priority to provide the data, or they are busy with other things, and you have to, as experience that we saw, is you have to make it easier in some ways that the collaboration will be better in that sense. So that's something we also try to improve every time, because if we make it easier for the reporter, they will also collaborate and provide the data in the way you want and in accurate way you need it.
The word challenge has been mentioned several times. Minister of Finance started with that. Central Bank has continued that flow. We also found it challenging to collect the data on different levels. I think it's data that should be easily accessible, like incoming people. Obviously, we're looking at boats, crew, but also obviously with the private sector itself. We did a demand and supply analysis and collecting that data, especially when it comes to financials. People find it harder to share that. I think that is an indication of a trust level, which is countrywide. And so it's been challenging, but I think we have been able to collect sufficient data, obviously, to conclude that the marine industry has a significant impact on the GDP, 16%. So it is available, but I think what was suggested is making it easier to provide data through systems and technology should definitely help, because then it's not a matter of trust. It's something that's part of a process that you follow on a regular basis.
I think it's not the case of data being available. It's about sharing data and also verifying that the data that you share is the accurate data, because there's a lot of data out there, but I think everything that we communicate should have a verification whether or not the data is correct, because incorrect data is a recipe for disaster. Let me give you an example. The end of last year, some tourist arrival data was shared, and it wasn't verified with the airport. As a result, we now, and that is the good news, we set up a sort of a committee between the Bureau of Statistics, also Justice, Immigration Department, together with the Sint Maarten Tourism Board and the airport, to make sure that whatever data we communicate is the correct data. And we're using two different sources of information to make sure that everything is correct before we communicate it.
How is it going within the Ministry of TIAC? Because Department of Statistics falls within the ministry, where data collection, also any challenges you guys are trying to overcome right now?
The more we realize that we become and we can get more accurate information. Because when you have to depend on persons, and as the good lady mentioned, Reggie, with respect to the private sector giving information when they have other priorities, they don't trust and have confidence of where this information is going to go, if it's going to be shared with other entities. These are some of the unwritten things and unspoken things, and the reasons why, we give all kind of reasons why, we cooperate and not cooperate. But I think these type of initiatives are extremely important to be able to sensitize persons in the public as to why it's important in cooperation, how the information is used, that information is not shared, and so that we can then get better information, because the statistics department does not make data. Let's make that very clear. We can calculate the GDP, but it's based on information from many sources. And if persons don't cooperate and don't provide the information, or if the information, as you indicated, is not accurate, the output will not be accurate, and then we would then want to question the results. But we can only provide and calculate the information that we get. And of course, if there are questions, we ask. But if someone gives us financial statements, we can question their financial statements. So these are some of the challenges. There's a number of other challenges that I think one of the biggest challenges for the government organization, the Department of Results under me, is the financial resources to be able to have the resources to be able to hire the people, keep the people, train the people, as well as do the kind of research that we would like to do. And sometimes with the budgetary constraints, that's a reality that we're living in. I wish sometimes we had the kind of resource like others, like the central bank, i.e. But unfortunately, that's not my reality. And the people that we have, we try to retain. And persons, when they're good, they get taken. Some of them, the former head is now an MP in government. We had good people like Mackie. She's gone to SMDF. But I take pride in when we have people that they get well developed, they become shining examples, and people take that, and that's fine. And our PB, I see Claude in the back there. So but that is one of the biggest challenges for the organization as well, because then retaining knowledge and the trailing and growing becomes slower. You grow, but at a slower pace. And those are some of the challenges, but we do what we have. But the most important thing is, and another important factor that I think we should also mention is, we are a very small country, a very small population. We're not like a big country that have millions of people. You know what's the relevance of that important factor? I can ask 10,000, these 10,000, if I have a population of millions, I can ask these 10,000 people, but the rest millions isn't bothered. So then I can always change that group of 10,000 and ask another 10,000, and it wouldn't impact that community. But when you have a small community that is 40, 50,000 people, you only have, few of 10,000. And you can ask those people every time the same different question. And there's a thing what we call in statistics, survey fatigue.
So now my question is to everyone here, how do we create a data literate society? So how do we encourage, whether these are employees in the private sector or those in the public sector, to start to think about the questions that they're asking, the information they're collecting and how that becomes usable data. So how do we change our own behavior to be essentially our own collectors of data?
I think one of the challenges I think a lot of Caribbean islands face is what already mentioned. I put it as that data fragmentation, is the sense that we have different institutions collecting data in their own way, and you don't have like good collaboration regarding collecting your data and putting in the same kind of system that is accessible to everybody.
We are using it on an hourly basis. So every morning we get briefings on the number of aircrafts arriving at what particular time, the number of aircrafts departing. We have data on when passengers check in prior to aircraft departing, so we can make an assessment of the amount of security lanes that is going to be open, because it doesn't make sense to open all the security lanes when nobody is there. So we do that on an hourly basis. We do it every day, and that in turn turns into an efficiency of the organization, and it also turns into a reduction of spending, because otherwise it doesn't make any sense. We do it for arriving passengers as well. So that's what we do on an hourly, daily basis. What we also do for the longer term, and that's how we create our summer schedule and our winter schedule, is because we already know the confirmed amount of flights coming in between now and the end of October. We can make an assessment of what we call the load factor per aircraft, and it even leads to we can even calculate as much as the economic impact that will have on the economy of Sint Maarten. So I think using data starts within, well, at least my circle of influence, and then we are always open to share that information with the broader Sint Maarten community.
So are there categories that businesses or private sector should be aware of? So how can we educate the private sector to prepare them for that more consolidated reporting in the future?
I think we have two things. One of the things, for example, you can look what's happening abroad. For example, developing countries, how they collaborate with each other in the sense of having agreements between institutions that you share data on a regular basis, using, for example, once kind of software, and then you structure the data in the same way, so then it can be, you can use it as fast as the other ones are for the public. And the other aspect is to get the awareness, to put people, for example, in our case now, for example, we are planning to have a campaign on the importance of data. So apart from this symposium, for example, we are going also to do a balance of payment campaign, where we gonna do more promotion on why it's important, etc. So those kind of things, I think, will help in that sense.
Is there going to be a collaboration with the Department of Statistics on that?
Sorry?
Will there be a collaboration with the Department of Statistics or the Ministry of TIAT on that?
In the Bob campaign, we do it, let me put it that way, because now we are planning to do like a testimonial video where we will interview different kind of people, including government entities, and we are planning, for example, to let them for us also promote it via their platform to the public.
If I may, I think he's being a little modest, but we're supposed to be doing a podcast tomorrow.
Do share.
But I think the first step is educating our public, the business community, sensitizing them, making them aware of what we need, why we need it, how we need it, so that we can get their cooperation. If we don't get their cooperation, he gets it, thankfully, from the banks, who has no reason not to provide information. And that's why when the bank leverages themselves to the customer, you need to explain why this transaction is being, they have to provide it if they want a transaction to go ahead. So they have a little bit more leverage to get the information that they need, and then it can be compiled along the lines that they need it. We unfortunately have to really be begging to get their financial statements, and we can't just go into their business and, and make financial statements for them. So it's a different situation for us to try to get information. So I think using the moral persuasion element is a very important factor, and that requires also education and being aware. So then I think that is why we can start by doing these podcasts, so that the public can then understand it a little bit more, and then they'll be more willing to provide the information. And when we have the data, we can then do the analysis and then turn it into information and give it back to the public, so that they can also see, and I know they can see that, the information is published in the form of a total. So you will never see your individual number. It's a total, but hopefully as well, I think there's another aspect that where we want the business community to also use information to not only the CPI to then the labor agreement and the adjustments of their salaries, but we want them to be able to use information regularly to get and know and make decisions about their business. Is the economy going up or down? So this is the kind of awareness that we need to create, and then afterwards, it will then spark cooperation and the private sector to be able to assist us with getting information. When we get information, we could then share it easily. We also in doing open data as well. That's one of our pilots that we have to execute as well for the country package. So we're looking forward to getting to that level and having these type of also dashboards that where you can run queries and stuff like that. So we're in the same lines, and I think starting by the awareness is extremely important.
Just a small example, the moment we opened our arrival facilities through the kiosks, there was one question mentioned, and it said, how much money do you make? That was a question that was not supposed to be. I think we removed it after 2 days or 1 day because it created so much animosity, saying, hey, but who is going to do something with that information? So I think the type of questions that we're asking in combination with creating trust, collecting the information, make sure it's anonymized and that it's used for higher purposes, I think that is very important.
Type of information one institution needs versus the other. You might not need it, but when we do in our marketing for tourism and we are marketing at a higher income group, we want to be able to know that, is this really the group coming? Are they coming from the places that we're actually having our activities? So that's why it's extremely important sometimes certain questions. One of the questions that we don't never ask from the statistics department is the individual's name and address. Their name, because we don't need to have, in particular when it comes to the population, because we don't allow people to drill down to where you can survey in on a particular person. But names is never asked because we want to maintain the integrity of our surveys, so that people don't feel like, you're coming after them, etc. So, but yeah, sometimes you need certain types of information, and we get that, and it's okay, I guess, if the airport takes it on, because when we do the tourism expenditure excess surveys, we will capture the information in terms of the income groups, because we want to know who's coming, the size of the family, because that influences how much money, the length of stay, the income levels, so that we can then compare that with who we were trying to target. So, but we do that other ways as well. So there are other different methods to do it. And I certainly agree that if the airport has to take it out because it gives the wrong impression, certainly that's not a problem. But it's just to show the relevance of why certain questions are asked.
Yeah, I think, that you're talking about it when it comes to tourism arrivals, but I think that trust is also something that has to be addressed locally. You mentioned financial statements, Sint Maarten Development Fund, we get subsidy from government, and we have to submit our financial statements also towards the BOP calculation. So how do we, again, in a small community, really build that trust? Because when someone from Department of Statistics comes to my house with a census, they know that they knocked on Mackie's door because Mackie opened the door and she answered all of the questions. So how do we create that trust, particularly in such a small community?
One is by not asking the name. that individual is also praised the work that we do. We are sworn civil servants that we can reveal information. We hire people to do the census because they have to go and knock on every door, and those persons are then aware of their obligations to they can share the information, and then when the information is compiled, it's compiled as a group. So individually, always that person know that information, but they don't. They're not allowed to go and give that information.
And what's it like with the private sector when it comes to being very open about your actual business performance to contribute to these larger data efforts?
So I just wanted to respond as well. I think it comes back again to also providing the information why you're collecting data. If you want to have people participate, creating some understanding as to why you're collecting the data, that might help as well, because people are afraid that it's for something that they don't know about. And then for the private sector, I think every entity on Sint Maarten is paying their taxes. It's filing anyway, should anyway. And so I think there is definitely that collaboration, that willingness, because as was pointed out, there's a lot of frustration about the lack of statistics, the lack of vision, the lack of direction that creates. And that trickles down to the private sector as well. So I think the private sector is very willing to collaborate with collecting data and creating statistics, because it can only improve the operations of the country if we really collaborate. So I think they also, most companies would have the information more readily available. They're not surprised about it, especially if it's announced in advance, like we're doing a campaign, we're looking to improve this or that. I think you would be surprised. And I think the only reason why we were struggling a little bit was that you're hiring a third party entity to do the economic impact study, the surveys and everything. You need for them to understand who that is, what role they play, and so when it was a foreign entity, it wasn't a Sint Maarten entity. I think when it's an entity like the Department of Statistics, obviously they are the entity that should collect the data and statistics. So that definitely makes a big difference. But in most countries, to be efficient, it's somebody that's a third party. It's not integrated, and so maybe that will become one of the challenges as well. If it's part of a ministry, perhaps it should be more a third-party authority.
One of the things I would like to, because I think in certain cases that might be true, in other cases not, because trust me, I think Reggie mentioned it as well. Well-organized private companies might be willing to share the information, but a great majority in absolute terms of the private entities might not be as willing or organized and timely with their information. That's the general more reality of gathering statistics. Whether you use individuals of the department or whether you use the persons that we gather the information from. Sometimes, as a matter of fact, particularly when it's come to consultants doing the jobs, people are actually more willing to talk to them or provide them with information because maybe they feel like, the information you don't get back to the government compared to when civil servants go and talk to them. So, you have all those situations. But I think I want to re-emphasize that we're not there yet, but we need to get there. We need to be able to get to where we're much more automated with the things that we do so that we can just get information without having to go and ask persons for information. One example is, and I know that the Minister of Justice, together with the Minister of Finance, is trying to help is Asikuda. Asikuda is a system, costs us money, but that helps us to be able to know what's coming in to the country and what's leaving the country. And everyone, down to the list of everything that's in that container and the price that they get it. When we have that type of information, then everyone will be required to submit that information. Then that's information that the country knows all of the imports and as well as all of the exports that could then be categorized in the what we call the ISA classification system that we have according to our GDP. Then Reggie, them from the central bank would be able to use that information for their balance of payments as well. So, imagine the day where we could take the crib number and that number can be coded to be identify what type of business it is, what industry, the sub industry, and down to their location on the island, down to whether it's whatever type of coding and information we think is important. That when we run a query, we can do it based on those characteristics, and we can have the TOT that they paid. We can be able to compare it to last year, because when you look at, sometimes you get more revenue, but you don't know if it's better collection. The people get higher salaries. They're working overtime, of all of other reasons, and you would want to be able to dissect the information. Or they're actually doing more, they're generating more business. So you want to be able to understand how the business, and some business might look at it as quote unquote harassment, but we actually want to look at it as are they doing more business? And we want to be able to compare it to previous year, the previous month, the previous quarter. That's the kind of stuff that we would like to do, because then we can start to see, is the economy doing better? And we compare it obviously with other indicators, so that we do a cross comparison, so that we look at, because if it's doing better, is tourism doing better? Are the tourism indicators doing better? Car rental tax, hotel rent tax, timeshare tax. Compare that with cruise tourism, stay over tourism, where the persons are coming from. So when we do all of type of comparative analysis, then we get better insight. And that, if we can have that at our fingertip, just by us taking these perspectives into account, coding the crib number, so that when they pay thing, and when you do a query, you won't be able to do it on an individual company name, but you can do it as a sector. So, and you can compare, how are the restaurants in Simpson Bay doing to the ones in town? How are the whatever type of business doing from 1 month to the next? And just by running queries, and I think those type of analysis gives us insight into how the economy is actually doing.